which is equivalent to like $300,000 today. We wouldn't be sitting in this room if income tax was 3% on the first $300,000 you made, would we? We would even tolerate that. Okay? That was not the intent. It was the illusion they brought it in. They triggered our patriotic duty. So once they had it in, and the bankers had control, now they could start moving it forward. In 1929, they created the Great Depression. It was set up. People knew what was going to happen in August before the Great Depression hit. I think it was in October or later that year. Okay? What they did, we were able to show the governments who actually controlled the monetary systems now. So with control of the stock markets, they caused hardships for many people. Now, with economic control and the ability to manipulate the economies, they cause booms and busts, creating hardships at will. See, they'd be able to create these cycles of good times, bad times, good times, bad times. And when you're in the bad time, guess what you'll line up for? Benefits. In 1940, they created the UIC card, which is really an indirect tax disguised as a benefit. That's how they had to actually bring it in. They disguised it as a benefit to get people to sign up for the card. And really at that point, it really had no grander detrimental illusion, because all it was, what they were trying to do with that, it was the start of their personalized tracking system and the attachment of the federal government giving them jurisdiction over those who applied. See, our federal government was not created with jurisdiction over our private lives. So it needed a way, it had no ability, no reason, a way to track us and stuff. Then in 1950, and through that period of time, they were infringing on provincial jurisdiction all over the place. And finally, in 1950, their control was challenged in the Lord Nelson case, which resulted in a Supreme Court order giving the federal government 12 years to remove themselves from the exclusive provincial jurisdiction, get this country back the way it was designed. Okay, and it was during these 12 years, from 1950 to 1962, they developed the illusion that we have today. What we're living in today, we never always lived in it. Okay, today they have a controlled federal government, which created corporations with the same names as the provinces, which gave the federal government control over these companies they just created. And with their illusionary country built, they can now pass laws that appear to invade real provincial jurisdiction, but do not. This allowed the federal government, which was controlled by the world bankers, to create a top-down power structure with a de facto federal government and enter into stuff like the provincial tax collection agreements by 1962. This is exactly what the Supreme Court told them they couldn't do, is enter into agreements with each other. To look at this from an unconstitutional point, it's evidence like this, you go in and it says it's unconstitutional, until you get to the point where you actually see how they did it. So they created agreements like that with their federally created companies without violating the 1950 Supreme Court order or the B&A Act, the created document of this country. And the only thing they had to do now is to keep the people blind to their illusion by using the media to promote fear and create fictitious courts to punish anyone who refused to obey them.
This is Russell Parisky. He's about to describe the concourse events that took place now. Pay close attention.
And so as we sat in court, I was talking to my wife, and I'm trying to figure out which argument to do best, right? And I had one file with all my court papers in it. And what was really unique about that is, because I had all my papers together at one point, I started noticing something. My name was spelled different on all the papers. And I knew at that point, I heard something called a nom de guerre, which talked about capitalization, your name and stuff like that. So I was saying, well, wonder what this is about. So I asked my wife, should I even bother arguing about the capitalization of my name? She never answered me, and I never answered myself, which was like a blessing in disguise. They called my name, I stood up, and the first thing out of my mouth, I said, excuse me, Your Honor, could you be so kind and ask the Crown who they intended to summons here, the natural person or the artificial? And wow, what a reaction. That Crown flew out of his chair, waving my court papers. Your Honor, he's trying to challenge the whole system, specifically the legal system. I'm going, what? I'm just asking a question. Well, to this day, they've never answered that question. But because they never answered it, what happened in the court case, the judge made some orders. One, he made an order that I was a natural person. Whether it existed or not, he made an order. Another, he made an order that I was the defendant. I was the person they were trying to charge. So that whole court case progressed all the way up to a couple more hearings and stuff, and we finally went and set a court date, and it was 11 months into the future, which was really nice. So we studied. It's like, well, if we're going to court, we better start studying this stuff. Started seeing a clearer picture there. So by the time we got to court, we were a little bit more prepared. I had about a 3-hour defense, and I thought it was very well structured, and looking back, I found it was fundamentally flawed. We still hadn't found the last piece. And so court date starts. We walk into court in Chilliwack, and the Crown comes up and says, hey, look, we're really busy here today. They just accidentally overbooked the day. And I said, okay, you know, we're looking for our name up on the docket in the courtroom, and they usually have them up there, and ours wasn't up there. Courtroom 1 wasn't up there. And then the last minute, they go and put the docket up for courtroom 1. And on there was not only my trial, which was scheduled for basically the whole day, 5 other trials and about 15 first appearances. And it's like, wow, did they ever overbook the day? So we walked in there, and the courtroom filled up. It held about 35 people maybe, and it filled up. And it was sort of a different little atmosphere going on in there. And so the first thing we heard is the clerk of the court goes, oh, let's deal with this Parizki matter first. So I stood up and I said, hey, I don't even know if I'm still supposed to be here or not. Nobody's going to answer my question. Who do you guys want? I mean, I was still arguing that point. And they said, well, look, you know, we're not here to discuss that. We're just so busy. We overbooked the room. Would you mind going to Abbotsford? And I thought, well, you know, I even think today is like, what would they have done if I said, yeah, I would mind? I never, you know, if people knew how naive we were at that point, what we didn't really notice, because again, when you're in those situations, you're blinded to reality around you. We got up, we left the courtroom, and so did everybody in the courtroom get up and leave the courtroom, because it was just all our friends that came to see it. What was the reason they sent us to Abbotsford in the first place? They were overbooked. Well, where was everybody else that was supposed to be there at 9:30? And so as we look back, our brother-in-law, he showed up about 20 minutes late, walks in the courtroom, it was empty. You know, he goes, oh, well, where's the Parizki case? Oh, they went to Abbotsford. Everybody knew where we went. A business associate of mine, he walked in maybe half hour later with a partner, and it was still empty. So we went, wow, something's really going on here. So we drove down to Abbotsford, and we walked into this other courtroom. It was really different. It had not all that ornate woodwork or bars or whatever. It was just an open room with the judge's bench at the end and a bunch of chairs. Walk in there, the clerk says, oh, come sit up here. You know, you didn't have to do all the formality. It was a whole different atmosphere there. And another thing we noticed when we drove up to the courthouse, we noticed we were studying this law of flags and stuff like that, and we looked up, and yes, they had a nice little Canadian flag over the courtroom, you know, just attached to a little 2-inch pole. So we said, okay, it has a flag there, good. So we walked in, and then the court case starts going, and usually in court case, the Crown gets up and they lay out their whole defense. And I was charged with Section 238, failing to comply to a demand letter. So it was real fundamentally simple. Did they send you the demand letter, and did you comply? Well, they sent me one, and they had proof. I didn't comply, so they had proof of that, so they thought. And so it's really fundamentally a simple court case. Like, it's a no-brainer to win or lose if you haven't fulfilled it. So they got up, and they laid out their case, and they had affidavits for this and affidavits for that. And that took us all the way up almost to lunch hour. And so the judge looks at me, and she goes, well, do you have any evidence and stuff? And I went, I knew by the study we have done is to realize there's a lot of stuff going on out there that we have no idea what words mean anymore. So I said, hey, I don't even know what that word means. So he said, well, it's close enough to lunch. Let's take a break and go see duty counsel, go ask somebody or whatever. So we had lunch. We're going out in the hallway there, and all my friends said, oh, man, it looks pretty bad. CCR had a really good case. And I said, well, thanks for your support. You know, you're going down. Yeah, but it looked really bad. So we had lunch and stuff, and we walked back in there. And I was getting prepared to present my defense. And I mean, I thought I had it nailed down really good. So I'm getting all fidgety and nervous and stuff, trying to get ready to do it. And the judge walks in. She sits down, and she looks to the Crown. She goes, where does it say in the Income Tax Act you can tell him where he has to send the files? And I go, what do you mean? We always tell him where we want them to send it. Well, it doesn't say that in the income tax that you can tell him where he has to send it. And they're going, what? And I started watching that. The judge was starting to really spin this thing out of control, and the Crown's going, what? So the Crown would go for a huddle, and they call it a stand down. I call it a huddle, and they talk a little bit and come back, and they throw in their interpretation of it. Judge gets a little perplexed, and the judge gets down. She says, well, I need to stand down. Judge gets down, goes into the back room, 5 to 10 minutes, comes back, and starts spinning another question. And this went back and forth probably 2 or 3 times. Finally, to the point where the judge says, no, I don't see you guys presented your case. Not enough evidence here or whatever. Case acquitted. And I didn't even have to say a word. I mean, I'm sitting there going, should I speak? No, she's doing good. I mean, she was taken over and did a really great job, so why should I open my mouth? And so that was it. We stood there. The judge says, case acquitted. And we knew that they could appeal it in 30 days, so we knew we weren't out of the woods. We waited the 30 days, no appeal. And we were going, wow, what happened here? My wife and I stood on the courthouse going, what happened? You see, as much as the study we've done, we still at that point didn't find this little piece, the importance of what had happened there. And what was this illusion we had going on in our country?